Mark Rogers, voice of college football, just the other day posted a new video on the Michigan channel here at the Voice of College Football on the most difficult games and win probability for Michigan this season. Yet another Ohio State off-season victory because Ohio State is in the first position here, where according to Mark, Michigan has a 44% chance to win at Columbus. So I'll start there, folks, and we'll go with Ferris as the numbers guy on this one. Does this seem right? Does this mean all the pressure's on Ryan Day and Michigan's just smooth sailing? I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah. So first of all, Mark did a win probability analysis. I also did a win probability analysis from a couple weeks ago. The one that I did was based on it was very numbers focused. I tried to take emotion out of it, and it was very much based on the point spread. And I used Phil Steele's has sort of a converter. You can take a point spread and convert that into the probability of a win. So, for example, if the point spread is between 3.5 and 7, the probability of win is 35%. Just to give you an example. Looking at these probabilities here, let's first start with Ohio State. I actually was more pessimistic than Mark. So, I think Mark had, what was that, 44%. I had only 26%, but I based that off the 9.5 point spread. Ideally, what's going to happen is that Michigan's going to beat Texas. They're going to go from being number 12, number 10 in the country, somewhere in there, to being maybe number 2 or number 3 in the country. Maybe just number 2, because you beat Texas. That's the most quality win you could have of any team. Presumably our quarterback situation will be resolved by then, and we should be in good shape. And the number will be the number with Ohio State will come down. But actually, in this case, I think Mark is, based on what we know so far, Mark saying Michigan 44% win probability is high. I have a lower number.
Pretty generous.
Right. So, I'm trying to be realistic. I'm trying to be real. Okay, let's put it that way.
Sure.
Oregon, we have a 52% win probability. Well, Oregon, believe it or not, is favored over Ohio State. When they play, Oregon is favored over Ohio State. Now, this game is going to be, the Oregon-Michigan game is going to be in Ann Arbor. Right. Conflicting reports, but I thought it was supposed to be a night game. I don't know if either of you can confirm that.
Yeah, time has not been announced. Michigan State has Oregon at night. We have not had our time confirmed yet.
Okay, all right. So let me just say, tea leaves point to potentially, Mays out, night game, Oregon. If all that happens, it is a November 2nd game. Sometimes it gets a little weird about scheduling in November, and teams can kind of reject it. But I would think that would be the game that would be at night for. If you're saying Michigan State's going to be night, that might be back to back though, right? Michigan State.
So their game's like October. Their game's like early October, I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So maybe I retract that a little bit. If Michigan State is announced as a night game, I believe it might be back to back with the Oregon game, which is November 2nd. Michigan State the previous week, I believe. So regardless, I put the probability of a win at 48%. Mark's got it at 52%. Either way, we're talking about a coin flip. And I've said before, that is the game of the year. That is the pivotal game of the year. Michigan wins that. Even if they lose that the early Texas game, they win that Oregon game, and they will have the inside track to a playoff spot. If they beat Texas, they will have the inside track to a bye and Big Ten championship, etc. So if they beat Oregon after beating Texas, right? So if there were one game that I would go to, it would be that game, the Oregon game. Coin flip there. Texas, Michigan, 52% win probability. I had it at 35% because the line is over 3. Texas is favored by more than 3. So I've got that as a 35% chance of winning. Also, keep in mind that the quarterback situation may not be really ironed out by then. So I could see a very similar situation to what happened to Alabama last year, where Milroe wasn't set as the quarterback. Texas beat Alabama, but then Alabama won out after that. So I put the probability at 35%, so 17% less than the 52% probability that Mark had. And then the final one here, I think this one is a little crazy to say that Michigan. I don't know if Mark's on the chat or not.
Well, yeah, Mark might be listening.
Okay, well, if Mark's listening, I'd like to know what the rationale is here. Michigan with only a 61% probability. This is at Washington, so I do want to point that out. The point spread is 12 and a half. The last I checked, a 12 and a half point spread is, you're probably looking at somewhere around 80%. So 12 and a half point spread is about 80% probability of winning. So 61 is being very generous to Washington. This may be a night game. This might be in the West Coast. I mean, it is on the West Coast. Michigan has to travel. Okay, so I get all of that, kind of the history of Michigan traveling to Pac-10, Pac-12 teams. But I just don't see it from the actual teams on the field. I think Washington, since they met in the championship game, has lost a lot more than Michigan has, or at least the next wave of players are not to the same caliber as Michigan has replaced their players pretty nicely outside of the quarterback position and arguably one or two other positions. So I would say 80% plus for Washington. But I will say, if Michigan were to lose to Washington, okay, if Michigan were to lose to Washington, you can retroactively say, oh, it's because they went to the West Coast. Oh, it was a late start. It was, the crowd, the decibel level was high, whatever it is, right? Those are the reasons they would lose. But I'm looking at the actual teams, and I'm just not seeing it. Be curious in the chat if anyone sees another sort of hiccup game. I think one other game that was mentioned by Mark in his analysis was USC. USC had a 62% probability. I had an 80% probability based on a 10.5 point spread for Michigan.
Yeah, I'll touch on the Washington one in particular because I don't have a problem with the other three, and I didn't list any others because I think these are the key four here. But yeah, Michigan with only a 61% win probability when, look, Washington and Michigan both lost players. I'm not denying that. I'm also not denying that Michigan's playing the game at Washington, but obviously it's essentially a different team at Washington. Like, it's one thing to lose some key pieces to the draft. Every team does that every year who's an elite team. But Washington's a different team. They have a different coach. All their offensive weapons are gone. I don't even know. There's not that many people coming back, period.
No.
So Jed Fish, tons of respect for him as a coach, but he does usually need a year. His first year usually isn't. I mean, at Arizona, I think they had like one win. He needs a building year usually, and so I don't think he's going to go quite one win. But at the same time, I just think Michigan's going to given the fact that Michigan beat them with all their weapons last year. Michigan returns almost everybody from that defense. Offense will be a question, as we know, a little bit more. But yeah, I'm thinking closer to the 80s for that one. TJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, looking at the probabilities, I mean, none of them really jump out at me except the Washington one. I think we destroy Washington. I really don't. I think it's going to be like a 20, 30 point victory. I think being at 52% for Oregon and Texas are fair. Obviously, I think it's slanted our way because it's a home game. I think Ohio State, I'm okay with it being at 44. And the reason why is because it's on the road. They're loaded up. We have QB uncertainty at this time. So as it stands in July 2nd of 2024, I have zero issue with any of these probabilities. We'll find out weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4 where we are. Obviously, it will adjust. We just got to get our quarterback figured out because, like, honestly, I would like to just say I think we're getting Texas, but like our quarterback is halting me from being a little too egotistical about that game because I really do think our team is better than Texas. But we all know, if your signal caller is not playing at a I don't want to say elite level, but an above average level against a team like Texas, you could have a tough day. So we'll just have to see where we are going into fall camp, and then but I think I feel good about every game. So to me, Oregon and Ohio State are the ones that bring me the biggest concern. Not that Texas is something I'm looking past. It's just as long as we have competent quarterback play, I just think we are a better team. I really do.
Yeah, and just a quick little recap. I adjusted the numbers a little bit, and I'm expecting, based on my analysis, 2.85 losses, so almost 3 losses. The over-under is 9.5. So that sounds pessimistic, but that's only because there's probabilities of games like Washington that are 80%, and I've got to factor that in. But yeah, there's a 20% chance they could lose it. If they run the table on the 9 games that are not the big three being Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State, if they run the table on those, there's a 75% chance they're going to win 1 out of those 3 games, according to my analysis. So, the key is you got to take care of business and not have a hiccup because you've got those 3 big games. And then out of those 3 games, you only have to win 1 out of those 3 in order to make the playoffs. And just a little side note here, there's going to be a logjam at the top of the Big Ten, high likelihood, because you've got Oregon, you've got Ohio State, you've got Michigan. All 3 could go 1-1 versus the other 2. Okay, then you have Penn State, and they get to avoid Michigan. Then you've got, I know this sounds silly, but you've got Rutgers as well. They get to avoid Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State. So
look out for Rutgers.
I mean, it's just because of their schedule, but it's very possible you could have 3 teams, 4 teams, that could have very similar records at the end of the year. And the team that doesn't make the Big Ten title game, but still makes the playoffs, if they can squeeze in and get a home game, they might be better off than the 2 teams that have to play that extra game just to get a bye. You have to play an extra game to get a bye. Does that make any sense? I know you get a banner if you win the game, but at the Big Ten title game. But it'll be interesting to see if 3 teams can squeeze into the top 8 in the Big Ten. And I would say the number 3 team will have a better path than the number 2 team, and maybe even the number 1 team, because they don't have to play that extra game, that extra tough game. So just a thought there.
We'll see.
Yeah. I think there are. I take your point, TJ, on the unknown with Alex Orji, right? Because all of this is really content. I think we're basing some of this on the assumption that Alex Orji will be able to complete some forward passes. We're hoping for that 62%. Friend of the program, Dennis Fithian, thinks he's going to be at 59%.
Who will be on the call-in show next week.
That's right.
If anyone wants to look forward to that, Dennis Fithian will be joining me on next week's call-in show, not this week's. We got a bunch of new viewers in. No call-in show this Thursday, but next week, Dennis Fithian, along with Ferris, will be joining me for the call-in show.
Yeah, and Dennis is just amazing. Definitely, this is cooperation, competition, but also cooperation with him. Listen to his show. He's got great stuff. He has nice guests, and it'll be great to have him on our show as well.